Hi, my name is Crystal Morgan, and I'm a certified confidence coach that helps women confidently communicate who they are to the people they love. And I'm excited to have a conversation with Pearl today.
Hello, sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here. Once you leave the clouds, you're under. Ain't it funny how there ain't no rain or clear? Why'd it take so long to leave you in the rearview mirror? Now nobody gonna steal my sunshine or turn my blue sky gray. All I know is at the end of the day, wildflowers grow when there ain't no shade.
Hello, everybody, and here we are again, another Conversation with Pearl episode, and I'm so excited to bring an amazing coach with us today. And, oftentimes I get asked, well, Pearl, why would you have a coach on if you're already a coach? Listen, I can't help everybody. It's just like when you need to lose weight, right? There's tons of programs out there to pick from. If you do it right, it's going to work. So the more resources we have for you, the better. And I'm excited because she's totally my jam. I love talking about confidence, and this is going to be so much fun. And so today I'm bringing you Crystal Morgan. She is a certified life coach that specializes in helping women express themselves clearly so they don't feel misunderstood. How many times we feel like, oh, they're not listening to me, they don't understand what I'm saying, right? So through her own experiences and struggling to feel connected with herself and other people in her world, she's learned the secrets behind communicating confidently to the people around her. And that's so important, is having that core way of communicating so people understand what you're saying. I love that her superpower is helping women feel empowered to express themselves authentically to the world so they can speak up when they want, take action when they want, and ultimately get what they want. And who, girlfriend, does not want to get what they want? And so I'm so excited. Crystal, welcome to the show today.
Hi, so happy to be here.
Excited to have you. So tell everybody where you're joining us from.
I am in San Diego, California.
So today we're actually recording this on 4th of July. So everybody understands we're here celebrating what we do, but also celebrating our wonderful country. And Tell us, what's the weather like right now out there for you?
Actually, it's pretty warm. It's about in the 80s. I'm having to crank my AC up to about, or down to the 60s just so I don't sweat while I'm talking to you, Pearl. But yeah, it's sunny. And the great thing about also being out here, it's not usually very cloudy. So you're going to have sun. And the nice thing is that there is also, if you don't like having the sun beaming on your back and you don't have any sunblock and you burn easy, that's probably a problem. But I love heat. So nice and sunny and bright.
Keep the dry heat. I don't miss that too much. Sometimes I do when it comes to allergies. But what I loved about living in California, people used to crack up. I was like, they're like, why do you like it? I go, well, because one day I can go to the mountains and go skiing. I can go to the beach. I've got all these access to great things, and I don't have to have the 4 seasons with it. As you and I were talking before we came on, we're both from the DC area, and that snow was like, I just get tired of the snow.
Yeah. And it's funny because on the other side, because, the grass is always greener, and people I talk to here, they're thinking, how could you leave that? You have all the seasons and you get a chance to experience all of it. And I always let them know, you see, I know the snow sounds fun, but you have to remember that there's work associated with the snow. There's defrosting things, there's shoveling things, there's getting out in the morning when you're cold, all of that. So I say, I know it looks pretty, but it's better over here. Cause like you said, you drive up, you have your experience in the snow, you drive down, and then you're back at the beach, and that's it.
Absolutely. I love it. I love visiting my family in California just for those reasons. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you today, and we're going to get right into everything. I want to know, what was your life like growing up?
Yeah. So for me, I would classify it, and I hate to use the word normal because who has a normal, familyhood, but I guess I would say by American culture standards, very normal upbringing. Had two really loving parents that were very supportive of me and loved me. But just like everyone else, I had my own trauma that I really needed to work through. I was sexually abused at the age of 3. So my own perspective of life was pretty much very skewed into there must be something uniquely wrong with me. And I have to start with that because you have to understand that when you're that young, you don't have a way of really processing victimhood and the sense of like somebody making a decision, to affects you in any kind of way. So for me, my entire goal in life was driven by perfectionism and performance. I came up with this idea that it was very pertinent for me to never make a mistake, to make sure that everyone found me to be amicable and to be absolutely perfect, because I needed to make sure that they didn't know that there was something damaging about me. And so even though I looked extremely happy and, well-to-do on the outside, I was involved in sports and, I was the homecoming queen and all of that stuff. But I felt like I was a complete disaster inside. It was exhausting trying to constantly portray this person. And I, from even the age of 3, all the way up until my early 20s, still had instances of other men that were sexually abusing me. And so you get to a place where you're like, this is normal. This is just how it is. And living also in a place of utterly fear of men all the time, thinking they're trying to get out to get me. And so my self-worth was pretty much nothing. My self-esteem was pretty much nothing. My daily mantra was always, well, I'm not really good enough. And then I got to this place, maybe, late teens, early 20s, where it really just compounded at some point. And I found myself in a place where I hated everything about life. My thought was, if this is what it's going to be like, I don't need to be doing this. And so I dropped into a really deep depression. And I just completely got to this place where I prayed for death. I remember thinking, I don't need to wake up the next day. Because my life at that point was pretty much go out, work, pretend, and I'd go home and I'd immediately go to sleep because I just wanted to shut out the noise. And I can remember so many different instances, different days where I either would just be looking at a car that was in the street and thinking to myself, if I just stepped in front of this car, it would all be over. Going into the kitchen and picking up a knife and just thinking, this could be over right now. And to this day, I cannot completely tell you. I have to think that it's just a miracle from God. I cannot say why I never actually went through with full suicide. I mean, I had to think of it as a miracle because it was on my mind all the time. And that was my huge obstacle in life to really get through because I was exhausted, I was tired, and I believed so much that I wasn't enough. And I eventually got to a place one day where I finally just decided, well, I either want to live or I don't want to live. And I don't seem to be gutsy enough to pull the trigger on this. So I'm going to now go and get help. And so that began a huge journey of me taking the time to really explore some of the biggest pains in my life, some of the biggest pains on my heart, which I'm really, really grateful for. But, that's a big piece, a chunk of my experiences, from childhood to early adulthood.
Wow, that's a lot. I mean, thinking of my next question was, what obstacles you overcome, and you went right through it, right? And so that's a lot to carry. And I'm just thinking when you're talking like that three-year-old little girl, like that's who you were carrying all those years until you decided to get help. And that 3-year-old little girl was going, please help me. I don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to get over this. And somebody who was sexually abused as well by my parents' best friend's son when he was babysitting us, that whole thing of can't tell anybody. How am I going to be perceived? That's a lot to carry and compound that on you. And you're right. It also affects like our relationships after that, right? Like for whatever reason, I don't know, we kind of get drawn to that vicious circle, and to be able to, and then to come through. I never said anything to anybody until I wrote about it in a book a few years ago. My husband, who I've been with for 34 years, he knew. I told him, and he's been so supportive, like, you need to talk about this, get it out there. There's more women like yourself, which you're right here sharing, and to think about, and for those that are listening that are going through this and haven't gotten addressed, it's a lot of burden to carry, and it's not yours to carry by yourself. Like, we didn't ask for this, right? You didn't ask for this. We didn't ask for it. We were little kids. We didn't know any better. We were trusted into the situation in most cases, so it's really, really important, as you said, is to finally get that help. I mean, I really believe God was with you going, this is not my plan for you. My plan for you is to do powerful things, to pay it forward. And, I talk about that often on our show. So the listeners are going to say, she's going to drop it again, that, I believe that God puts us here and says, I have a plan for you. I have tools for you. You need to develop them. The lessons you're going to go through, I don't really believe he wants us to be hurt in that way. I mean, that to me, that's like somebody, who doesn't understand the faith. However, he knows we're going to go through these challenges, and he believes that if we don't do something with the things we've gone through, the talents we have, and we just keep them in ourselves, it's cheating ourselves, but it's cheating others who, while you and I having this conversation right now, there is probably a woman or a man sitting out there going, I understand what they're saying. And we're both saying, go get help, right? Because it's important to have that. I think that's why I became a coach as well. It's like, I didn't want somebody to not go through what I did and feel alone, right? I didn't want somebody to go, not only that, but also I became a coach because I've got a 25 and 22-year-old. And I thought, being a mom was the bomb, being a CEO mom, but it wasn't for me. I was miserable being a stay-at-home mom. I'm too active. I'm too busy, so I say, I want people to understand you can have a business, you can have kids, you can have a career if you don't want to have, you can have all that, but also be empowered to do things in your life that you want to do. Because if you're looking at it tomorrow, what were you, what did you do? Right. And so what you have come through is amazing. And to be able to sit back and then go, okay, this isn't happening. I need to go do something for myself. Go get me help. So what were some of those first steps? Like, who influenced you, or what influenced you in your life that said, I need to get help? Other than the fact that, you kept thinking these thoughts, but something happened that said, not only I need to get help, but where did you go and who influenced you into that help?
Yeah, I'm so happy that you asked that. And because I think that, especially for what you were saying and for listeners there's always like that big gap of, this all sounds great, but what's that moment that you move forward and actually take a risk? Because when you're going from a place, and this was my experience where, and I know you were saying, if you're not speaking up, you don't tell anybody because you feel silenced in a way, because you're afraid that you're going to be misunderstood if you say something. And I can even remember times where I said something, but at such a young age, I'm saying things to other kids my age, and they're looking at me with crazy eyes. What are you talking about? So I had a lot of instances where I had already thought, I cannot share because people are not going to get it. And when I had that moment where I thought, okay, if you're not going to die, then we need to figure out how to live. What are we going to do? And I really just had I think a Hail Mary shot of, well, people talk about therapy, and I'm so happy. I think the culture is starting to really move and to support mental health in such a bigger way. But in my household, nobody talked about it. And the culture pretty much said, if you go to a therapist, you're pretty much crazy, right? Like those are for the crazy people. But I said, well, at this point I had just deemed myself crazy because I thought I can't do this anymore. So I didn't tell anybody, but I went and I found this therapist, and we had about I want to say maybe 4 sessions, Pearl. I mean, it wasn't even a lot. And she told me about how I should go and get a little bit more independent. And I thought, oh, okay, that's the answer. And so I went and I just like moved out of my parents' house, and that was the end of that. And I never went back again, never having really dealt with anything. I was just kind of like, oh, well, there you go. And it wasn't until maybe about 3 or 4 years later where I hit the same block. I guess I got, exhausted pretending again. And what changed for me, because I know you were asking about what has really influenced or who has influenced me. And there's a couple that I met, I'll leave their names out of it for their privacy, but I met an amazing couple, and they, I can't even really, I don't even know. I was like, again, it really just was a miracle. It had to have just been a creator that decided, here's what you're going to do. And I met this amazing couple, and they were the first couple that really saw me for my potential rather than who I was. Up until that point, my own definition of myself was someone who was a victim, someone who wasn't good enough, someone who was damaged, and everybody else had it all figured out. But because I was so uniquely, in my mind, a piece of shit is what I said to myself, that no one else would be able to really mop it up. And they were the first people that nothing like big or special, but they spent time with me, and they actually spoke to me from a place of, you're not a victim. You're not somebody who can't make decisions. These things happen to you, but you have the possibilities of doing whatever you want. They talked to me about being a business owner, just in general. No one had ever even entertained the thought with me that I could potentially make a lot of money or be a business owner, or even be someone who could tell my story like this. I mean, that didn't even cross my mind. My goal was, well, maybe at some point in time, I'll figure out how to at least hide well enough to get through this thing called life. And so they were profoundly influential. And then there's one other couple that was profoundly, that I have to mention, Justin and Abby Stumball. And they're the first, they're life consultants, but they're the first ones that I actually met me language for expressing my own story and feeling like I wasn't alone for the first time. They have an amazing program, and I've learned so much from them. And it was the first time that somebody was essentially validating that I was a person who needed so much self-compassion because I didn't really have any. And it's such a profound thing. And, I'm sure you probably experienced this too, Pearl. It's a dynamic thing when someone gives you permission to say words that can express your own experiences that you've had. That's what allows us to go in and to share something with a coach like yourself or any other coach, to be able to say, here is the words that I need to use to express. And it's part of the reason that I do what it is that I do, is that right there. What words do you need to express shame, to express hurt, to express fear? What language do you need so that when you go and you have a conversation with someone that you feel is safe enough to have a conversation with, that you in return feel seen? And that's what allows us to feel understood and connected. And so I'm such a big proponent of getting around safe people so that you can do that. And if you don't have anyone safe, that's when you go to a coach or you go to a mental health professional. But those are some of the biggest influences in my life that turned everything around.
And I like to like having that safe place, like that somebody understands and says, we get you, we understand you, and it's okay. Right. And to be all the, I've heard of them, and I've heard about their program. It's a great program. And, and it's funny how sometimes too, you have to go through a few different like therapists or coaches to get that right fit. Everybody's not the right fit for you. And I love that you found that you didn't give up, that you still pushed through and you found those people that safe space. It's kind of like what my husband and I would do in our relationship is like, I grew up in a house, like you didn't talk about any of the stuff we're talking about. I grew up in a house that if my parents got in an argument, they didn't talk. You walked on eggshells it could be a week to 2 weeks. I grew up in a house where my father, who, if he and my mother got in an argument, and she wanted to do something, he would be like, if you do that, then I'm going to be gone. To the point that she didn't come to my own bridal shower because they got in an argument and said, you go, I'm going to divorce you. Right. And so I was very hurt by that. But I realized that, as I've gone through, I got married when I was like 21. I was young. We got engaged when I was like 20 or 19. But through like watching that relationship, that's all I knew how to communicate. And with my husband, he was my biggest influence, was to say, for me to answer that question, because he's the one who said, you got to tell me what's bothering you, to the point that if I would not say what's bothering with me, like if we were having a disagreement or something, it could be an argument, whatever, we don't fight. It's just a disagreement. And I would shut down because all I knew to do was to shut down. I didn't know I had a voice. I didn't know I had the safe space with him to share my voice, like what you were sharing. And he was so funny. He would go, okay, if I wouldn't engage in the conversation, he would have a conversation with me without me saying a word. He'd answer for me. And then I'd get mad. I'm like, that's not what I would say. That's not how I would be. So I finally started going, and to this day, he'll tell you, I taught her to have a voice, but now she doesn't shut up. He'll joke around like that. But it's important to know, and to our listeners to hear as well, that having those safe people, like you said, right. And have that safe person. And if they're not, then they're not supposed to be in your circle. If they can't hear that, they're not supposed to be in your circle. It's even down to really close friends. I had a friend who lived with me for about a year and a half, 2 years. And a situation happened where she was doing something at a retreat, and something happened there, and it didn't line up with my ethics. And when I, questioned her about it, her response ethically was very alarming. And I said, you know what? This is not who I want around me. You're going to need to leave. And to this day, like that ended our friendship right there. So that safe person is important. It's really, really to have that safe person, because you need to be able to not just have that safe person, but would you agree too, to have something to bounce ideas off of, right? Like, and to know that they know you so well that they'll tell you, are you kidding me? That's not something you should be doing. Or they'll tell you, yeah, let's go. They're there to support you. Right. And so I just love that you found that safe space, and that's what we all need to do, So I want to talk about your coaching. Like, so you went through some of this. So what brought you into starting to coach women? And then I want to know, as you're saying that too, I want to know, because, you said your superpower is helping women feel empowered to express themselves authentically to the world, so they can speak up when they want, take action when they want, and ultimately get what they want. So tell us what led you into this, and how are you seeing what you're doing? How are you seeing that change for the women you're helping?
Yeah. So when I initially started coaching, I started with really just working with women, and it was around the time of COVID. And so most people were thinking about really restructuring themselves, because when everybody was stuck at home, it was, so these are all the things that we've been avoiding and ignoring, and now they're just blown up, right? And as time went on, I really started to shift and help my clients really work on their confidence, their self-confidence. And for me, Pearl, what that means is getting to a place where you feel comfortable enough in being who you are, regardless of what's happening around you, and feeling great enough where you can go, I'm going to confront whatever emotion is going to come. So if I'm going to go out there into the unknown, into the uncertainty, and all that waits me is fear or disappointment or whatever it is, I am going to go into it anyway, because it's just going to be an emotion that I'm going to experience. And I've learned that emotion is not me. That's just caused by thinking that I have right now. And I'm just going to continue to keep pushing forward. And I think that was something that was greatly needed at a time when everybody was really trying to make a transition and get back to their everyday lives and create something that was really going to be new. And from that standpoint, now where I love to help women is what I've noticed is, especially in a patriarchal culture that we're in, where women subconsciously and maybe even consciously have been taught that we are supposed to be amicable, and we're servers, and we're meant to kind of, go with the flow with certain things. Speaking up isn't something that is seen as being woman-like. And it's not that there's a problem with being a servant or coming from that perspective. But when you're taught that, and that becomes the forefront, you innately kind of get to this place where your inner dialogue says, I'm only allowed to express myself as long as it adheres to these rules, where we talk about being the good girl and making sure that you're trying to meet everyone's expectations. And coming from my own story, as you heard, I mean, that was where I lived all the time. I need to make sure anything that I say or I put in front of you is going to be pleasing to what you want and pleasing to what I think is going to help me display this ultimate like show of I'm this specific type of person. And so what I love to really do now is help crash, demolish, whatever words you want to use, that whole storyline and help women get to a place where it's not about fulfilling what everybody else wants for you. It's about what is it that you want. And I know that when you can stop silencing your voice, that you'll start to say what's on your mind. And when you start to say what's on your mind, and that becomes a realization, then you're more likely to start taking action to what you're saying. And then when you take action, you actually start to see results play out in your life. And I find that a lot of women are in two major buckets. They're either not saying what they want, what they think, or they are saying it, but they're lying in some kind of way and they're holding back. And we see it showing up in big areas and in small areas. It could be as small as, you know, your husband or your boyfriend says something to you or asks you about your opinion, and you're too scared to state your opinion because you're thinking in your mind, he's going to think I'm stupid or he's not going to love me anymore. And all of these things sound simple, but they drive to this underlying fear that a lot of us have, that if I don't keep up with performing in this way that makes you happy, then what's going to happen is I will eventually be abandoned. Maybe I'll be abandoned emotionally. It could also be physically. And so we get afraid of risking the relationship in some kind of way. But it's so necessary to confront risking the relationship as a potential, because that relationship needs to move into a place where they actually get to have a relationship with you. Whether you like punk music or whether you like hip hop, that needs to be stated. You don't always have to agree with it. But in order to do that, you're going to need to start speaking up. And the beauty of what I've seen is everything from, I have a client who recently was in an abusive relationship, 2 kids, and unfortunately, her significant other had bipolar disorder, a lot of different things, and he didn't want to get help for it. And she wanted herself and her kids to be safe, of course. So through coaching, we were able to get to a place where she was able to set aside a boundary and actually state with her words and her actions, here's the kind of relationship that I want to have with you. And here's the kind of relationship that I want you to have with the kids that we have. And so she was able to actually, because she was so afraid of getting to this place where everyone was going to be disappointed if she took legal action to really enforce this. But she got to a place where she realized she had options. He was not in control. She was in control. At the end of the day, I always tell people, you are in control of what you decide to do. You are in control of your reactions. You can't control someone else, but every time they say or do something, you get a chance to control that. She got to a place able to do that. And so she moved on. And now her kids are in a safer place and she's in a safer place. And now she feels like she can go back to starting to build the life that she always wanted to build. I have another client who was having challenges with really communicating with her mother. She felt like her mother was the one in control. And she easily, after some time with coaching, realized, again, I'm actually in control. And I'm afraid to risk the relationship with my mother because I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to say anything that's going to make her mad. But I always point out to people, you don't like the relationship now as it is. You're not doing anything that's actually helping it move towards what you want. And so she was able to say, okay, Mom, here's what I need to happen in our relationship. She took the time to do that. So there's a lot of examples like that. And it's such a beautiful process, because once you get to that place where you say to yourself, you start to see yourself stand up for yourself and share your voice the way that you want to, what starts to happen is you live from a place of who you are instead of who you think you need to pretend to be. And it's like a big breath of fresh air, so much lighter. And so I love that work, and I love watching women, transform in that way.
I love that. And, we have so much in that same pathway of how we approach coaching. And, because like you said, I grew up, I'm 58 years young. I grew up watching my mom, everything at home was for us and the kids. Watch my grandmother, same thing. And so in our minds for women and, and we're kind of, I feel like we're coming through that, but there's still that, oh, this is what my role is supposed to be as a female. Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be like that. And the thing is, like, I'm such a big proponent about self-care. What do you do for yourself first before you do for all these people that you have in your life and your world, whoever they are? And when you don't do for yourself and you don't pour in your cup, you start feeling like you said, you feel like, oh, they're going to think I'm stupid. They're not going to love me. All these thoughts come in. And then when you start to do, they make us feel guilty because they're like, well, what are you doing that for? And then you're like, you have to communicate. And so communication is so important to say, I love you and I need to do some things for me so that I can love you even better. But I can be 100% in. I love you, but I might have a little resentment because I feel like you are, you get to do these things, or this is how you approach stuff, or this is how I'm feeling with this situation. And so it's so important. I always love to share with my sister-in-law, Melissa. She, is just starting my coaching business, and I was visiting them in Southern California. And my nephew was, I think, maybe 3 to 4 years old, somewhere around there. And he was she's like, come on, he's going to put his clothes away. We can go upstairs while he does that. I'm like, okay. He literally was putting his clothes in the bottom drawer. And I sat there and I was like, wow. I'm like, Melissa, this is really like, I didn't do that with my kids. I didn't, she's like, well, I look at it this way. This house is a business. And because of her, that's where I came up with the CEO mom. She's like, this house is like a business. I'm running a business here. I'm not responsible for all his clothes. He needs to learn these responsibilities. And I was like, it's so true that we as women need to approach, if you are the CEO mom, I don't like the word stay-at-home mom because you're staying at home, but you're running a business and that's your house, right? Yeah. So everybody has a role in that. And I love when I coach women, and I Leslie, who I interviewed last week on the show, she shared the same thing that, if you got things to get done, be like, we need to get these things done. Which part do you want to take control of? Right. And so that's communicating that this is all of us. Where do you want to help out in? Not that, oh, I can't go do that with my friend on Saturday because I got a clean house, right? No, and I love that that taking that and also setting boundaries. I love to talk about setting boundaries. Yeah. It's so, so important. And you gave the example of a mom. I'm going to give you an example. I have an amazing son that was born of my heart. He is mixed race. And we tried for 10 years to have a family. And then 2.5 years later, we had our youngest one through in vitro help. And so God really played a hand in how our family was developed. And when I first adopted my oldest one, my mom and dad were awesome. My dad just ate this whole thing up. But as my son got older and my parents divorced after 47 years of marriage, my dad had come to stay with us. And so we had a kind of a strained relationship because of how everything went. Now, I was a daddy's girl. My world revolved around my dad. And so he was living with us and he would complain about my son, this, my son, that, my son, this. And I was like, come on, I'd say to my son, can you just listen to grandpa? Stop giving him such a hard time, right? And his friend came to me and said, Miss Pearl, it's not your son, it's his grandfather. So I found out, so I said to my dad, you need to stop this. Well, fast forward a few years. He had gotten married and divorced. And I thought, let me go visit his ex-wife to say hi. And I'm sitting with her and she says, I need to tell you something I never told you. And I'm like, about what? She goes, about your dad. And so with kids, and I remember doing this, your parents tell you, put the stuff away. You always know where it's at. My son played football. He could never find his cleats when it came time for football practice. And I'm like, if you put them where they're, and he would swear to me, Mom, I'm telling you, I put them in the laundry room. Okay, well, they're not there. I don't tell you. Well, she shared with me that my dad was taking his cleats and hiding them in the backyard on him. And then when it came time for him to go, he would put them back out there. All of a sudden they'd show up. And I sat there and I looked at her, I go, why didn't you tell me? And she's like, because I didn't know how you would react and I wasn't sure. And I actually said to her, I go, you know what? I think God did the right thing of you not telling me, because I probably would be in jail, because you don't do that to kids, let alone, And then I found out he was saying racial things to my son, everything. So I literally sat in my car. I was in her car for a good few hours. I was like, okay, God, tell me what I do with all this information. Because I'm like, I have a 2.5-hour ride home. How do I unpack all this in the ride home? And then how do I tell my son, oh my gosh. So I called him right away. I'm like, I'm so sorry. He goes, Mom, it's not your fault. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm your mama bear. I'm supposed to protect you. Right. But I learned then I can't protect them from everything. Right. And then I literally just said, I have boundaries. I coach on boundaries. I have boundaries about how people are treated. And I was like, that's it. So I literally wrote an obituary to my father being my father. I texted to my brother, my sister, my mother, who, even though they were divorced, I texted all them. And I literally said, when his physical body is no longer here, I don't need to know about it, because as today, he is no longer my father. So, so it goes to that whole setting boundaries on relationships and having those safe people around you. I'm so glad you shared on that, because it's so important. And to have, like you were sharing earlier, have those people you can talk to that can be, okay, let's help you through this. Let's unpack. Yeah. It's okay to feel those feelings and everything, So it's really important, even to the fact today, I'm like you, I'm very big about how women are treated and things, I'm at the gym today and I'm working out, and this young man comes in, and he's come in a couple of times. He plays this Bluetooth with this, why he doesn't wear a headset, I don't understand. It's just a small community gym.
Yeah.
And today he came in. The other day I was near the end of my workout when he did it. So today he comes in and he's playing it kind of loud. There was 4 of us women in there, and it was vulgar, demeaning about women. I finally said, after like 20 minutes, I'm like, I can't be the coach I am and not go say something. So I went up to him and I just said, hey, I love that you want to listen to your music, and could you do me a favor and turn it down? It's kind of vulgar and demeaning to women, and there's 4 women in this room. You know? So, and he was like, okay. So, I say all that because to those that are listening, is that's things you have to communicate, right? As you teach about communicating those feelings, I probably, before I was a coach, I probably would have been fearful of going to say anything to him. I probably was like, oh my God, he's going to go think I'm a Karen or something. Yeah. But I was like, I did it politely. In fact, my trainer was like, you did that really nicely. I'm like, well, I said, but it goes back to communicating. And so I guess what I want to ask you next is that, communication, like where do you find that you personally have struggled the most with communication? And then where do you find, like right now, like you were talking about coming through COVID. And I think, we've had a lot of challenges where, the women had to go back. I felt like we kind of went backwards a little bit, because maybe the husband or the significant other made more money than the other one, and they had to teach school. I mean, we all know schools were closed down. They had to become a teacher and a mom and all that stuff, right? So as we're coming through this, and like you said, I'm so glad mental health is being discussed more. What are you seeing? Like, where are you seeing that the women you work with are struggling in that area? And what's your perspective? Or, we all have different thoughts, but what are your thoughts on where we're moving with that?
Yeah. So I think there were 2 questions in there. I'm going to try and let me know if I don't cover it. But for the first question, where I struggled the most with my own communication, and this is in hindsight, and it's also where I find most women have the struggle. And it's why I focused on this. It was actually my own inner dialogue. I mean, because you have to remember, anything I was saying was just a bunch of like, that I was spewing out to people to help keep this facade. So my own internal conversation is where most of the action was, right? That's where I've got the, you suck, you're such a loser, there's something wrong with you, why are you like this? A conversation happening all day long. So one of the first places I had to start was actually my own conversation that I was having with myself. And the journey, and what I tell people is really, if I were to sum it up, the biggest journey you go on is learning the difference between self-compassion and judgment. Judgment is never an appropriate response to anything, ever. We think it is, because if someone is not going to judge me, including myself, then how am I going to make sure that I beat myself into becoming the kind of person that everybody needs to see and that I secretly really need to see in order to feel like I'm accepted and loved in this world and the people that are all around me? And so what I see even in the midst of COVID and even now, it's still the same conversation. Even your example of going and telling this guy at the gym, like, hey, you got to turn your music down. All the thoughts that were going through your head all still come back to almost what I was mentioning before. And you're like, what's this guy going to think of me? And even below that layer, what we're secretly thinking is, what am I going to think about what he thinks of me? What am I going to think? What am I making it mean about me as this person who's now going to go against the flow and say something that maybe he might not agree with? Because at the end of the day, we're people, we're human. We want to be loved. We want to be liked. We don't want to be kicked out of the tribe. And even though that's not a personal tribe for you in that moment, it is a tribe in a sense. And it's a beautiful thing, because what really happened, if people noticed in your own conversation, and what happened was you decided, this is the kind of person that I want to be. This is how I want to show up. And it bothers me. So because of that, I'm going to confront the possibility of fear of someone not liking me. And I'm going to go into the fray anyway. And that's the conversation that I have day in and day out, because you can put whatever situation you want to put out there, whether it's the person at the gym, whether it's a family member. There's always the expectation that is in the situation. Your point about, here's my role, right? Here's my role of, I need to be the teacher. I need to be whatever kind of mom that I'm supposed to be. There's that dialogue happening. And then there's actually your own dialogue of, what does that even mean for me? And do I want to live up to whatever that is? And most people don't go down to that layer. And that's the layer that needs the most conversation, because that's where you're actually trying to get honest with yourself, or you're lying to yourself about it. But the minute that you get clear on that, and want to be the kind of mom that shows up for her son and teaches, and homeschools, or whatever the situation might be for you, know why you want to do that. Like your reasons for it. Then you get to show up authentically for it. And then it doesn't matter what words then are coming out of your mouth, because you weren't thinking about in that situation, what am I going to say, as much as I just need to say something. So it's not the words, it's not any of that. It's you stating to yourself, this is me. This is my voice, meaning this is the person that is going to be expressed and come out of me and through me and show out into the world. And I'm going to not hide her, and I'm going to let her out. That's the work that deep down so many women are working on. Now, when they come to me, they don't think that, right? You always just think like, I've really been trying to tell my mother she doesn't need to come over here every week. And I just don't know how to tell her that, right? That's what you're thinking about. But the work is, all right, let's talk about, what's your relationship like with your mother, and why do you not feel safe enough to say that, right? It's really that.
I love that. And you're right. That's what we have to do. We have to break down and going, I have a voice. I need to figure out how, each situation, how I want to communicate that. And so I love that you're doing that. This has been so much fun. I know that all the listeners are getting lots of great tidbits and everything. We're just going to have a few more questions here, but my big question is, before I ask you a question, now I know why, by everything you just kind of summed up there, why your phrase that you like from Maya Angelou is, success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and like how you do it. And that's so true. Like in relationships, I just loved it. It's that really embodies exactly what we talked about today. Is that, knowing what you like to do, why do you like to do it? And, and how are you going to get it done? Right. What is your why? Understand what that why is, and breaking it down. I have a Shiro League, and we meet every Sunday evening. It's a community of women. It's 8 to 9 p.m. on Zoom, not recorded. It's women. We just get together. And we talk about these things, but I'll ask them something like last night. I'm like, okay, we're going to work on this. tell me, if you could change something in your life, what would it be? And they would tell me, I'm like, okay, but why? What happens when that happens? I'm like, oh, why are you pushing me? So it's like, but that's the thing is we can start here, but if we dig deep inside, you figured it out, And so it's funny because one of the things we're doing this week is I'm like, okay, we're going to do some dancing this week. So we were dancing in the room last night. I'm like, okay, and I gave one of them a challenge. I said, I'm challenging you to I gave them all the challenge, but you need to post a picture, either a video or a picture of you dancing on Facebook where somebody can see you doing it and tag the cheerleader. And the one goes, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, you just told me you want to build confidence. This is how I'm going to help you build confidence. You're going to put you in front of people that don't know you and do know you, and you're going to go and just dance. It was so funny. So that, I just love to just share that. So I want to ask you a personal question. What I want to know is, I'm very big on self-care. We've talked about that through communication, today with you and I and stuff. What do you do for your self-care? What's something that you do this is what I do all the time. Like for me, I take a staycation once a quarter. I go to the beach overnight. What is it something that you do?
Yeah. That's such an interesting question because I don't think about it in that way. Like I don't think about, I'm going to, set aside time for it. My perspective of it is that I personally think that life is one big playground. And the only thing I set aside intentionally time for is the moments when I'm going to be doing. I have things that I need to do. And then everything else is my only requirement is human being. I'm going to be. So I have all this space in my life. And so I know for me, that the biggest thing is I just go with whatever I feel like that inner child piece of me wants to do. I have to let her out, and whatever she wants to do, that's what we're going to do. So I have had everything from, I'm going to watch a kid's show, like a show that like I haven't watched in years, and I'm going to sit and I'm just going to enjoy it, all the way to going outside. And I found a lizard one day and I started chasing it. Like, what do you imagine that little kid version of you when you let her out, whatever she wants to do, that's what we do, so it could be anything from hiking. I'm like, what do you want to do? Right. And sometimes even it's just simple. I want to share a piece of myself with someone. And it could just be getting on the phone and having a conversation or texting someone and just telling them about my day. Self-care to me is about letting that side of me have a say, because we're so used to letting our prefrontal cortex, the area of our brain that makes decisions, and I love that part. It's like, that's the part that needs to go and to get things done in the day. And then after that, I want to let everything else, that part of me that doesn't have the expectation to do anything but be, I want to let her drive and let her tell me what needs to happen. So for me, it could look like, recently, it was a staycation. I took 2 weeks and I did absolutely nothing. And for in the month of June, and that's what she told us. She's like, my inner child was just like, hey, I just need to not be around people and not do anything. And that's what we did. So I don't have a specific thing. It's just, what do I feel led to do?
I love that. I love that, listening to our little, inner child. We don't listen to her very often, we sometimes forget about her. So I love that you do that and you make that space for her. And chasing a lizard sounds fun. I was like, laughing. I go, oh yeah, that would be fun. I used to collect daddy long legs and put him in a jar and bring him home from school. My mother would be like, what are you bringing that home for?
Yes, it's so fun. It's like when you get rid of all the other junk, it's just, who are you and what do you want to do?
This has been a blast. So before we go to, as everybody knows, there's a little thing we do in our closing part of the show, but tell everybody, I know we'll post it on social media and everything, but tell everybody where they can find you.
Yes. So you can go to my website, crystalmorgancoaching.com, and that's Crystal spelled with a CRY. In case you need that, I offer free consultations, so you can go ahead and schedule some time to chat with me. I also have a podcast, Confidence Looks Good on You, Girl, which you can find on all major podcast platforms.
Love it. Confidence looks good on you. That's so awesome. So this has been a blast. I've been having so much fun. And I just want to, as we said, those that are new to the show may not know this, but those do have been listening for a while. We have our Better Questions, Better Life cards. I've already prepared, Crystal, that we're going to do a little shuffle with her. So you tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. And let's see what your question is. What and who is influencing you right now?
Oh my goodness. That is such a I'm trying to think like, who do I pick? I think right now, I would say the most would be, her name is Cara Lowenthal, and she is also a confidence coach. But what she does speak a little bit more on is feminism and how the patriarchy has really influenced women overall. And I think that I just love her. She has a profound skill of being able to really talk about the mind and what we think about as women and the culture. And so she blows my mind sometimes with that. And so she's one person that I think has really profoundly given me things to think about that I haven't even thought about, being a Black woman in America and what that means and how that's influenced how I see things. So I would say that's a person I would pick right now that's been pretty influential.
Awesome. I love that. I want to check her out. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point too. Somebody might be listening going, she's a coach. It's like, yes, coaches need coaches. Like, and if you are listening as a listener and you have a coach that says, oh, I do everything I'm teaching you, run. Because nobody does life perfectly. You're not. And then also make sure they're certified, because some of them are out there going, oh, I'm certified, but they're not certified. So make sure they're certified. Yeah. But this has been so much fun. And before we go, I want to remind everybody that we have our 6th annual WSL Pajama Retreat. Is coming up September the 15th to September 19th. We are going to be in the Gulf Shores of Alabama. So you can go to wslivingretreats.com. That's wslivingretreats.com. You can grab your ticket there. We have payment plans available, but we have amazing speakers that are going to come. And we are going to be enjoying our theme of experiencing your journey of possibilities. So you will leave with a roadmap and understanding what your next step is and the goals you want to achieve. And also understand that you're not alone in exactly the conversations we've had today with Crystal about how do we communicate our needs, how do we communicate what our wants are, and then how do we move forward in those relationships. So I'm excited to have everybody here. And as I close up the show, every time I do, I want to say before we close out, thank you so much, Crystal, for joining us. Yes. And I want to remind everybody that you come into this world. We're a little in an oyster. It's a little rough on the outside, but as you open that oyster, inside there's a beautiful pearl. All of you are amazing pearls, and I want you to go find your inner pearl of greatness. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.
Hello, sunshine.